I was at a quiet lounge last Friday, catching up with an old friend I hadn't seen in nearly a year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And back in, say, 2024, he was the kind of guy who just lived for the grind. You know what I mean?
I do. Totally obsessed with metrics, with status.
Completely. Fitness stats, social hierarchy, and the raw, often cold mechanics of the dating market. He was sharp, maybe a little cynical, but undeniably driven.
Okay.
This time, though, he felt softer. He spent a good 10 minutes showing me his new social media feed.
And what was on it?
It was this curated stream of gentle masculinity and emotional mindfulness infographics.
I see where this is going.
His face had this serene, almost glassy-eyed calm as he was talking about unlearning toxic competitiveness and, embracing vulnerability.
Right.
To anyone else, he would have looked like a man who had finally found peace. He kept saying how the algorithm finally got healthy, how it was filtering out all the noise and the friction of his old interests.
The algorithm got healthy. That's the phrase he used.
That's the phrase. But then there was this strange moment. A notification flashed on his screen. An encrypted message from some private group with no name, just a string of digital coordinates.
And his expression changed.
Instantly. That Zen-like mask didn't just slip, it evaporated. For just a split second, I saw that old, hungry intensity come back into his eyes as he, reflexively tilted the phone away from me.
Wow.
He swiped it away into oblivion and went right back to talking about his meditation app, but the air in the room had changed.
Of course.
It was like watching one of those beautiful ones from the Mouse Utopia experiments, the ones who spent all day grooming and avoiding conflict while the whole social fabric around them just dissolved.
Perfect analogy.
He looked perfectly fixed, like a masterpiece of 2025 social engineering. Yet that one hidden notification, it proved the fire hadn't been put out.
It had just been driven into the basement.
Exactly. That sudden pivot from this public display of reformed docility to a private, hidden obsession, that's the defining story of this year. While all the platform data points to a natural decline in these hard-hitting masculine narratives, the reality is it's far more clinical.
It isn't a disappearance. It's a liquidation.
A liquidation. We are witnessing the birth of a digital underground where the most potent truths aren't shouted in the town square anymore, but they're whispered in the dark.
The system hasn't actually changed the human heart at all.
It has simply forced the truth to go into hiding.
And that intense friction you saw, that tension between the public docility and the private, hidden, strategic intensity, that's the core conflict we have to address today.
Right.
It's a systemic phenomenon, not just a personal choice. So our mission in this deep dive is to take that anecdote and move beyond speculation, to really analyze the clinical reality behind this pivot.
Because what we're seeing isn't some collective shift in values, is it? It feels much more like social engineering through algorithmic means.
That's it.
The competitive drive, the desire for status, for competence, none of that vanished. It was just forcibly suppressed, monetized, and then driven into these highly strategic, decentralized digital networks where it could be contained but not eliminated.
That's absolutely right. We're analyzing a system where narratives that are perceived as disruptive or hard-hitting are algorithmically contained and domesticated.
Tamed.
Exactly. And to understand this complex sort of coerced migration, we have a pretty precise roadmap. We're going to start by examining the environmental forces that are creating this modern confinement, which we've been calling the algorithmic cage.
Okay, the cage. And from there?
From there, we'll dive into the specific psychological harm being caused by the central stressor in all of this, the curated dating platforms.
Right. This is where intimacy gets engineered for revenue.
And the stress that comes from that acts as the ultimate catalyst for seeking these radical solutions.
Then finally, we get to the ideology itself.
Finally, we will analyze the resulting counter-ideology, the red pill, which provides the comprehensive intellectual framework for this new underground. This philosophy advocates for Machiavellian self-optimization as the necessary strategic response to what they see as a hostile, engineered world.
So it's a transition from just competitive instinct.
It's a cold, ruthless strategy.
Okay, so let's unpack that first piece. Let's start with that really deeply disturbing analogy I mentioned, the Mouse Utopia experiments, specifically John Calhoun's Universe 25.
Yes.
This feels like such a chillingly perfect frame for what's happening to us in the digital sphere, especially for young men trying to navigate these social systems.
Calhoun's work is absolutely essential here because it fundamentally reframed how we understand societal collapse. For anyone who's not familiar, he created this environment, Universe 25, that offered total abundance.
Paradise, basically.
The literal paradise for mice.
Yeah.
Unlimited food, water, perfect climate, no predators. The population just boomed at first, but then around day 560, the society just, it collapsed entirely.
And the key takeaway, the really shocking part, was that the problem wasn't scarcity. They had everything they could possibly need, physically.
Right. The collapse, what he termed the behavioral sink, was caused by social saturation.
Too many mice.
Too much interaction. Combined with a complete loss of meaningful social roles, there was nothing for them to do.
That is the critical distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
When basic survival is a given and purpose is just stripped away, the social structures that define who you are, they just start to degrade.
They fall apart. Cooperation declines, and pathological behaviors start to emerge. In the later stages of Universe 25, you see all the original, functional social dynamics, mating rituals, defending territory, nurturing the young. They completely broke down.
Can you walk us through the stages of that breakdown? I think understanding the sequence helps us kind of pinpoint where we might be now.
Certainly. So initially you had aggression and territoriality. The dominant males would fight to control space, but, well, the density was so high that fighting eventually became too costly. It was exhausting.
There's no winning.
No. So then you moved into a stage of social withdrawal. The females, they stopped defending their nests and they abandoned their young. And the male mice, they lost their reproductive roles entirely. They were physically present, but socially absent.
That sounds exactly like the moment my friend pivoted. That move from the grind to gentle mindfulness. It's an abandonment of high-friction social competition.
And it leads directly to the pathology you observed in him. The rise of the beautiful ones.
Right. The mice who just groom themselves.
These were the mice that ceased all functional social behavior. They stopped fighting, they stopped mating, they stopped any effort to raise families. They spent all their time exclusively on passive activities.
Primarily obsessive self-grooming.
Exactly. They were physically pristine, just perfect specimens, but psychologically detached and totally non-functional. They were just existing in this state of existential alienation within their manufactured comfort.
The parallel to the modern, curated aesthetic of digital self-care, that excessive focus on diet, grooming, non-functional wellness that you see all over social feeds, it's unnerving.
It's high-effort self-maintenance with zero contribution to the social utility of the group.
It's the ultimate adaptation to a zero-friction, zero-purpose environment, which is what the digital behavioral sink really is.
We can now view the current digital environment as an algorithmic cage. I mean, social media provides this engineered abundance of connectivity and information, but at the same time, it radically reduces behavior. It forces users into boxes that can be measured and monetized.
So the algorithm is incentivizing behaviors that are easy to track and consume, which, by definition, are often the least complex or functionally meaningful behaviors. You're just chasing status metrics that they're totally ephemeral.
Exactly. And critically, the individual's freedom is being curtailed by corporate values. They're enforced through content moderation and algorithmic filters. The goal is to maximize engagement, often by providing these low-friction, high-pleasure loops.
Which in turn reduces the user's capacity for high-friction, high-purpose behaviors.
Like real-world cooperation or, competitive assertion. The algorithm is literally trying to domesticate the competitive instinct by making docility the path of least resistance.
So the beautiful one is the domesticated man, the one who is submitted to the cage. But you also brought up the philosophical alienation that fuels the intellectual escape, this idea of data as an abstraction.
This is where that profound feeling of falseness comes from. Platforms record human behavior, a click, a swipe, a comment. But the platform fundamentally cannot capture the true why behind that action.
Right. Was the genuine, or was it just a reluctant social gesture?
Precisely. Was that purchase recommendation ignored because the user wasn't interested or because they just bought the item somewhere else an hour ago? The data radically simplifies and flattens concrete reality. It replaces the rich, subjective human experience with a quantifiable, abstract shadow.
And when people are forced to live their lives based on these flattened, abstract data points, when the system tells you who you are based on your quantifiable behavior, but your internal experience is screaming that it's wrong, it creates a profound existential alienation.
Which is why people start seeking radical explanations.
And that search for an explanation, That leads us to the Gnostic parallel.
Precisely. This psychological state fosters a worldview that is deeply, deeply similar to historical Gnosticism. In ancient Gnosticism, the material world was viewed as an illusion.
A flawed creation.
An inferior, often cruel, creation of a lesser deity, often called the demiurge. The Gnostics believed that material life was a prison, and to escape, you needed secret knowledge.
Right, gnosis.
Yes, the path to liberation required acquiring gnosis, esoteric, forbidden knowledge that revealed the true, higher spiritual order hidden beneath the false surface of the world. They were intensely skeptical of their senses, believing the physical world was inherently misleading.
Okay, so if we translate that to the manosphere's intellectual framework, the demiurge isn't a god. It's the algorithm itself. It's the system of corporate control, content moderation, and that quantitative reduction that defines the public sphere. And the prison walls are the constantly shifting, contradictory narratives of mainstream media and social acceptance.
That's the intellectual leap they make. The manosphere adopts this Gnostic structure wholesale. They view mainstream society, the one promoting this soft, engineered compliance, the one that rewards the beautiful ones, as a deliberate feminist matrix.
And they believe the real truth, the ruthless mechanics of social and sexual power, is hidden.
And only by ingesting the red pill, which is their source of forbidden knowledge, can they acquire the gnosis necessary to escape the illusion and regain true agency. The frustration they feel from the digital behavioral sink, that becomes the proof that the system is fundamentally flawed, driving the search for a Gnostic solution.
That philosophical framework it's powerful, but it needs a continuous, measurable input of real-world pain to keep it going. And based on what we've seen, there is no greater source of immediate, digitally engineered psychological stress than the arena of intimacy.
The dating apps.
The dating apps. We have clinical data that treats these platforms not as just benign social tools, but as central mechanisms generating widespread psychological stress and enforcing a specific and often profoundly damaging social structure.
This is where the abstract philosophy meets measurable clinical reality. The explosion in dating app use happened during a really unique period, the pandemic, which caused this massive influx of users who were seeking connection during a time of high social isolation.
And that gave the platforms immense market control.
Immense. And crucially, their business model rapidly pivoted
away from facilitating connection
and toward prioritizing match accumulation for revenue. It's a core conflict of interest built right into the platform's design.
Their primary goal stopped being successful pairings.
And it started being maximizing your time on app and converting you into a paying subscriber. To do this, they deployed incredibly sophisticated AI tools, not just to match people, but to actively manipulate the rate of success to keep both sets of users maximally engaged.
Which often means maximally frustrated.
Exactly. Yeah. And this manipulation created a starkly asymmetrical experience based on gender.
Let's talk about that asymmetry.
Well, the experience for female users often becomes one of, frankly, staggering abundance and saturation. The studies show they are frequently just inundated with so many matches, an overwhelming number of likes and initial messages, that decision-making becomes extremely difficult.
That's decision fatigue.
Classic decision fatigue. So instead of finding a partner, the sheer volume turns the whole interaction into a low-stakes game.
A validation machine.
Precisely. They accumulate matches for immediate psychological gratification, for approval, for validation, often as a temporary replacement for genuine intimacy. They receive immense social acceptance, but the saturation itself prevents high-quality connections from forming. They are, in effect, drowning in attention.
And meanwhile, the experience for male users is the exact inverse. It's engineered scarcity.
Men, statistically, receive very few responses and dramatically fewer initial matches. This immediate scarcity pushes them into a financial imperative.
They have to pay to play.
They're forced to quickly upgrade to these expensive pay-for-advantage subscriptions, buying features like super likes or boosts, just to gain a limited, fleeting priority over the non-paying members. They're essentially paying a premium just to alleviate a painful, algorithmically manufactured deficiency in attention.
And that structure is why the research so often compares these apps to casinos.
It's the perfect analogy. It relies on the mechanism of intermittent reinforcement to foster addictive behavior. The apps have to strategically throttle the reward, that occasional match, the infrequent positive response, to be just enough to keep users investing time and money.
It invokes classic gambler tendencies.
It does. But the reward can't be so consistently high that the user finds a successful relationship and leaves the platform.
Because then they lose a customer.
And that erodes the customer base. So that constant low-level frustration, the algorithmic throttling, is the engine of both the revenue model and the psychological harm.
We're talking about systemic match throttling.
Systemic match throttling, coupled with sophisticated AI that specifically optimizes for the emotional distress curve to maximize subscriber revenue. The consequences are they're measurable and clinically significant, particularly for young men.
Okay, let's detail those clinical consequences. What does the research actually tell us about the link between these platforms and mental health?
The studies are, they're unambiguous. They link the frequency and the length of dating app used directly to significantly higher rates of depression, generalized anxiety, and social comparison anxiety in men.
So you have men entering the app feeling lonely and looking for a connection.
Only to be systematically frustrated by the algorithm and the scarcity model. This failure then validates their feelings of low self-worth.
It creates a vicious, self-perpetuating downward spiral.
It does. The psychological distress caused by the platform further hinders their already limited ability to form healthy relationships in the real world. You can see how it becomes an engineered mental health crisis.
And that's exactly why this is being viewed as a public health concern, not just a matter of, a bad user experience.
That's right. The paper we analyzed, it explicitly calls for serious regulatory intervention. It argues against the very core of the business model.
So they're targeting the mechanisms of scarcity itself.
Correct. The study argues that match throttling and these pay-for-advantage models should be legally disallowed.
Why?
Because they have a disproportionately negative and clinically measurable impact on the health and psychological well-being of young men. When a for-profit design is demonstrated to create clinical levels of anxiety and depression across a massive demographic, the argument shifts from business ethics to necessary intervention to mitigate adverse public health outcomes.
So this engineered liquidation of natural connection channels.
It becomes the single biggest pressure, forcing men to seek alternative, rationalized, hyper-strategic frameworks, the Gnostic escape, just to survive the emotional violence of the modern dating market.
So that extreme, clinically verified psychological pressure combined with the philosophical certainty that the public world is an exploitative illusion, that's the fuel that's driving this underground ideology.
Exactly.
And the research confirms that this movement isn't softening, it's actually hardening. We're seeing clear evidence of a large-scale user migration toward more extreme viewpoints.
The data is definitive about this radicalizing pipeline within the manosphere. Research analyzing millions of posts across forums confirms a significant user migration flow. The older, milder communities.
Like the men's rights activists, the MRAs, or the original pickup artists?
Right. The MRAs, who focused on legal changes, and the PUAs, who are more about field tactics, they have been steadily losing relevance. They're being overshadowed by the newer, more toxic, and explicitly misogynistic communities.
We're talking about the red pill, MGTOW, and the incel communities.
Precisely. TRP, MGTOW, and incels are absorbing the users. This shows that the manosphere really shouldn't be seen as a set of disconnected subcultures. It's more of a cohesive, radicalizing whole.
So users, driven by increasing frustration and looking for more comprehensive answers, they migrate from the less toxic communities into the more stringent and antagonistic ones.
The frustration pushes them down the path of radicalization. And at the core of this radicalized philosophy is the rejection of the mainstream. To adopt the red pill means to fundamentally adopt an anti-feminist position and to define the matrix.
Okay, so what is the matrix according to this worldview?
The red pill philosophy positions itself as the objective truth, rejecting what they see as the pervasive feminist matrix that defines mainstream social and political discourse.
And they argue this matrix is a deliberate illusion.
A deliberate illusion that promotes the idea of female subordination while actively concealing a deeper truth. That men are institutionally and individually exploited.
Exploited how?
Economically through state systems and biologically at the intimate level. The system, they argue, is designed to extract male labor and resources while simultaneously denying them status or intimacy.
Okay, that's a huge claim. To make that credible, they have to anchor their philosophy in something.
They do. They anchor it in scientific and economic rationalizations, insisting their framework is based on pragmatism and truth based on observation.
So they selectively leverage two major discourses. First is evolutionary psychology.
They appropriate evolutionary psychology concepts. They use EP not really as a science, but more as a foundational text to explain what they see as women's dual mating strategy.
And this strategy is driven by biology, but they codify it into this highly transactional model.
The model suggests that women are biologically driven to seek superior genetics from a dominant male, the alpha, to ensure robust progeny, while at the same time securing commitment, resources, and provision from a supportive male, the beta.
It simplifies a very complex biological reality into a brutal social formula.
Which leads directly to the core acronym, AFBB.
Alpha fucks beta bucks.
The alpha fucks beta bucks principle. This formula is the psychological justification for their inherent mistrust of female intention. It suggests that women cannot be trusted to be honest about their desires or loyal in their commitments because their underlying biology dictates seeking two different resources from two different types of men.
And this principle is fundamental to the red pill gnosis because it provides this simple, universal explanation for why relationships feel exploitative to them.
It does. And that's the biological pillar. The second major pillar comes from the appropriation of neoclassical economics. This overlays a market structure onto human intimacy.
The sexual marketplace, or SMV.
The SMV framework analyzes relationships purely through the cold, quantitative lens of economics, supply, demand, resource allocation. It defines a relationship not as an intersubjective union, but as a commodity transaction.
And if you follow that logic, women are the sellers and men are the buyers.
Precisely. Women are viewed as the sellers of sex and relational intimacy, commodifying their youth, beauty, and fertility. Men are the buyers, offering their financial resources, security, commitment, and social status in exchange.
That neoliberal logic is incredibly compelling to this demographic, isn't it? It strips relationships of all the confusing emotional ambiguity.
And frames them entirely as transactional commodity relations. By quantifying attributes into an SMV score, your looks, career status, fitness, it turns self-improvement into a quantifiable investment.
You're not pursuing virtue for its own sake. You're maximizing your return on investment in the marketplace.
It shifts the entire goal from subjective happiness to objective maximization. This objective cold analysis serves as their ideological shield. If you treat relationships as a marketplace, you defend yourself against emotional exploitation, the very exploitation that the algorithmically controlled dating apps reinforce.
They're trying to replace vulnerability with calculus.
That's a great way to put it.
But doesn't this reductionist view, using terms like alpha fucks beta bucks and treating partners as commodities, doesn't it risk becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? I mean, doesn't adopting such a cynical lens invite the very behavior it tries to predict?
That is the great internal contradiction. The philosophy would argue that it is only describing the ugly truth that already exists, but you're right. The strategic necessity of adopting that philosophy undeniably shapes your behavior. It forces the practitioner to operate within a framework of transactional ruthlessness.
And that transition from just describing the market to playing the market ruthlessly is the core of their strategic response.
It is. Which brings us to the next stage.
So the philosophical groundwork is solid in their minds. The world is a lie, relationships are purely transactional, the environment is hostile. So the logical response is no longer to try and seek external change.
Right, that's the old MRA approach.
It's now to adapt and conquer by maximizing personal value and strategic cunning. This is really the essence of the digital underground.
The focus shifts entirely to an internal locus of control and self-optimization. The red pill strategy dictates that you must understand the rules of the perceived sexual battlefield and adapt to what they label as the innately deceptive nature of women.
So the core objective becomes maximizing your personal worth to dominate the sexual marketplace.
Exactly. And this brings us to the blueprint for the reformed man, the one who, like your friend, maintains public docility while cultivating intense personal power in the private sphere. This path is known as monk mode.
Monk mode. Let's talk about that.
Monk mode is a rigorous, structured path of self-improvement. It's designed to cultivate the necessary emotional rigidity and discipline. It mandates a triad of principles: isolation, introspection, and improvement.
It's basically a self-imposed exile from low-value stimulation.
That's it. So let's break those three components down, because this is where the theory becomes a practical day-to-day lifestyle.
Okay, let's start with isolation.
Isolation involves a forceful cutting off of junk activities. Any behavior that offers cheap, immediate dopamine or reinforces a low-value existence.
We're talking about social media, porn, video games.
Excessive social media consumption, porn use, non-productive video gaming, and minimizing low-value social obligations. Yes, The goal is to clear the noise and redirect all psychological energy toward productive outputs.
It's an information diet and a digital detox, but with a very aggressive intent behind it.
Precisely. Then, introspection follows. This phase demands a brutal self-assessment.
Looking in the mirror.
A very harsh mirror. Identifying your core weaknesses, your personality flaws, dependencies that make you vulnerable to exploitation in the marketplace. It involves tracking metrics of success, fitness gains, financial progress, career advancement, and seeing the self as a project to be optimized.
And improvement is the output of all that focused energy.
Yes. Improvement focuses aggressively on tangible, measurable areas. Fitness, so gym gains, finance, so income and asset accumulation, and social status, like career titles and authoritative competence. The entire process is designed to cultivate extreme self-discipline.
And to replace the negative mental feedback loops, that feeling of worthlessness created by dating scarcity.
With a powerful, tangible sense of competence.
Yeah.
And the final goal of all this optimization is the cultivation of an abundance mindset.
Okay, define abundance mindset in this context.
The abundance mindset is characterized by extreme indifference, nonchalance, and rock-solid self-worth. It is the psychological antithesis of the desperation and neediness inherent in that scarcity model imposed by the dating apps.
So if you are truly abundant, you are emotionally rigid. You're impervious to rejection or manipulation.
That's the goal. And this leads directly to the core strategic adoption of traits from the dark triad, specifically Machiavellianism and narcissism.
But not as natural personality defects.
No, not at all. They're seen as necessary functional tools for navigating the matrix.
Okay, let's unpack that. How do they interpret Machiavellianism?
Machiavellianism is interpreted here as the art of cunning, ruthless strategy, and subtextual warfare. It emphasizes transactionality over emotional connection and the ability to read and manipulate others by understanding their true motives, or as they term it, what makes people tick.
So it's about shrewdness and strategic coldness, really.
It is seen as a socially acquired, highly adaptive coping mechanism that's necessary to survive in a world where you assume others are operating from self-interest. The practice of Machiavellianism is the ability to move through social interactions with a chess player's mindset, always 2 steps ahead.
Then there is the cultivation of functional narcissism. This seems, highly counterintuitive to traditional self-improvement models.
It is, but within this philosophy, it is deemed absolutely essential. Functional narcissism is viewed not as a psychological flaw, but as a natural and necessary byproduct of success.
Success meaning visible achievements like physique, financial status, recognition.
Exactly. They argue it's essential for defeating what they call the collective feminine ego, prevalent in society, which they believe seeks to suppress male assertiveness.
So the wise man, according to this, must be both the detached philosopher and the self-aggrandizing achiever.
Exactly. The ideal practitioner must be the stoic and the narcissist, using ego as a controlled tool only when it's beneficial. For instance, in the sexual marketplace, where confidence and self-importance are perceived as high-value attractors.
So humility is only useful during the monk mode phase for honest self-assessment.
But ego is for social application and display. And the ultimate synthesis of these traits is what they call the rational Machiavellian, the individual who can seamlessly switch between these cognitive modalities.
How does that work in practice?
They must use rational thought, that cold, objective calculus, for long-term strategy and planning, like wealth building or career progression. But they must employ cunning, charisma, and emotional rhetoric for social application, particularly in attraction.
And this requires what they call finesse.
Finesse. The ability to modulate one's persona, to be civil yet unreachable, and to deploy the least amount of power necessary to achieve a goal.
The rejection of justification is central to this finesse. This links right back to my friend reflexively hiding that notification.
Because justification is transparency. And in this model, transparency is weakness. To the rational Machiavellian, a logician who tries to explain or justify his position when challenged is perceived as dishonest or lacking true power.
The truth of the Machiavellian must be self-evident in his status and actions.
Exactly. Justifying yourself immediately signals defensiveness, and it robs the action of its charismatic credibility. The private, encrypted notification is the purest form of this action without public justification.
And finally, this entire strategic edifice requires the rejection of the need for intersubjective connection, the very thing that dating apps liquidized in the first place. It's the ultimate psychological wall.
It is the final defense mechanism, and it's built upon the assumption of universal transactional exploitation. Men are advised to mature beyond the search for idealized, unconditional love. They must ignore deep natural needs for emotional vulnerability and intersubjective connection, because those very needs, the need to relax, to trust, to be open, are identified as the precise point of weakness that will inevitably be exploited by women for reproductive and economic gain.
So emotional rigidity is prioritized as the strongest, most rational shield against a fundamentally hostile world.
It's the only logical conclusion within their framework.
So what we've analyzed today, it really reveals a profound and systemic psychological pivot.
It's us.
The public sphere has been meticulously engineered through algorithmic control to promote docility and emotional compliance, the whole aesthetic of the beautiful one.
And at the same time, the intense pressures of engineered dating scarcity and that Gnostic intellectual escape hatch have driven hyper-strategic Machiavellian self-optimization into these decentralized private digital spaces.
The liquidation of older, high-friction competitive narratives, it didn't eliminate the competitive instinct.
No, not at all.
Yep.
It streamlined it, it refined it, and it forced it underground. The individual who was once a cynical but driven grinder is now a rational Machiavellian, a man who publicly displays his Zen-like compliance while privately executing a ruthless strategy of self-maximization.
And in this new underground knowledge, or gnosis, is the new form of defense. Acquiring this sophisticated understanding of the dark triad traits in Machiavellian strategy, it's framed not as aggression, but as acquiring a powerful intellectual shield.
A shield necessary for survival against a perceived reality of systematic exploitation. A shield necessary to navigate the algorithmic cage successfully.
The degradation of complex social systems and the increasing pressure from algorithmic control, it suggests a chilling truth. When community, purpose, and meaningful, authentic connection are systematically eroded, human intelligence doesn't default to chaos or anarchy.
Instead, it defaults to a cold, efficient transactional mode, a frightening echo of the self-aware, highly functional predator in the behavioral sink. The absence of virtue when purpose is liquidated is not chaos, but ruthless strategy.